Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Creation Myths. Let's make sure everything is looking good on YouTube before we go any further here. Chat, you know the deal. If everything looks okay, let me know. If there are any problems with the video or the audio, let me know. Let's just make sure we're good before we go any further. Sorry, I'm just waiting for YouTube to catch up, and then we'll get going. All right, I see me, and it all looks good, and I actually look like a person, not a blob. So hey, that's an improvement, right? So, hi everybody. Welcome back to Creation Myths. Yeah, funny you should mention that. I do have the wrong background set up. I have moved to a different location, so my office was previously in my basement, and now I'm in the attic. So I've relocated, which means everything around me is a little bit different. It's nice because I have a little more space, which is great. So yeah, here we are. Let's do this. So hi everybody. Obviously it's not my normal night. I'll have a separate thing on Wednesday of this week that I'll get set up pretty soon. But for tonight, we're going to do a pretty short one that's not directly related to creationism, which is why I'm doing it on a different night. It's kind of one of my extra things, not my main thing. And what we're going to do tonight, I think this is going to be really fun because this is actually a bit of class that I do. So a couple times over the course of an academic year, what we're going to do right now is something that I present to my students when we're talking about the origins of life, when we're talking about abiogenesis. Because I always start that topic with the question of what is life? What counts as alive? If we're going to talk about the origins of living things, we first need a definition for living things, right? So I am going to give you just like a teeny little piece of what I do during that class. And I did this just a couple weeks ago for the summer evolution class I teach, and I do this every fall, slightly modified in my, my kind of intro bio class. So the really fun part about this, folks, is this is really heavy on audience participation, okay? So as we go through, I'm going to put up slides. We're going to have slides, and I'm going to ask chat. If you're here live, chat, you get to participate. If you're watching this after, thank you for watching this, future viewers, but you unfortunately don't get to participate. But feel free to play along as though you were here live, because this is what I do in class. So we're going to go through a couple things. I'm going to ask chat to, provide examples, provide answers to the questions, and I'll put them on screen as appropriate. And the question that we want to answer is, what does alive mean, right? So let's get into this. Here is what we are going to start with. What is alive anyway? What are some characteristics of life? And what I want you to do, chat, is think about that biology class you had in like 9th grade, right? Where your teacher put up on the board or on the screen, like, here are the characteristics of living things. And then usually what happens right after that is, here's why viruses are not alive, right? Because they don't check all of those boxes. So give me some of the categories, give me some of the characteristics of living things. And we have our first bit of participation here. Yeah, able to reproduce, right? Yeah, reproduction is a characteristic of living things, right? I like this definition. Life is self-replicating information. I like that. Yeah, think about, all right, so let's think about those other things. We've got reproduction is one of them. We've got, Icarus has got another one here. Yep. Metabolism, Gray the Malkin also has it. Yep, metabolism is another big one, right? So we've got metabolism, we've got reproduction. What are some other ones? Proton gradient, it's getting a little particular. Let's think like 9th grade bio, right? Let's think 9th grade biology. I think by respiration, so that could go in two ways, right? It could go metabolism. It could also go something like exchange with the environment, which is a good one, right? There's some kind of interaction there. Ooh, homeostasis. This is a really good one. Homeostasis is a good one. Yeah, living things require like maintain some set of characteristics that are separate from the environment. Yeah, I like that. What else? Anything else with the environment? We've got reproduction, we've got metabolism. Ooh, there it is. I was hoping to see this one. Responding to the environment or responsive to stimuli. Yes, those are on the list. And then here we go, growth. And there's another word that goes with growth. Let's say growth and one other thing that's related, but not strictly the same. What's another thing that you do over the course of your life? You grow, but you also change. And that would be growth and kind of go hand in hand. Development, yes, right? We got it. Growth and development on there. Great. And then one more thing that I think is totally good. We want to have evolution on that list, right? Living things evolve. So let's look. I think we hit all the ones that I put on here. So let's see what I've got here. We've got grow and develop, respond to stimuli, reproduction, metabolism, and evolution. In general, right, these are the characteristics that you talk about with living things, right? And there may be some other things on here that you could consider, right? Something like, I like that somebody mentioned homeostasis as a really good one. Someone else said eating. Yeah, I think like exchange with the environment is a good one too, right? But this is a good list. So now we're going to play a game. We're all going to play a game together, and the game is called Is It Alive? So I'm going to give you all 5 examples, and your job is to tell me which ones are alive and which ones aren't. Easy. Very easy. Okay? And we're going to start easy, and it's going to get more complicated, but we're going to start really easy. So I like that we're just jumping right to it. Yes to all. I appreciate your dedication. Yeah. So let's start with this. This is a representation of bacteria. This is just E. coli. This is supposed to be like an E. coli cell. So is E. coli alive, everyone? Just give me a yes or a no. E. coli, is it alive? And keep track of your answers because we're going to have 5. And when we get through all 5, I want everyone to be able to tell me all together what your answers are. Okay, so everyone except a couple of jokers, thank you, Fitz, are telling me that E. coli is alive. Yeah, thanks. All right, so E. coli is alive. That one's easy, right? Okay, next on the list. And I recognize that you all, if you're sitting here watching me on a Monday night, this is probably not like the most blank slate audience you could imagine here. But think about how I would do this like in an intro bio class, right? Or a 200 level evolution class, a little bit different. So next one is a bacteriophage, right? So this is going to be like T2 or something, one of those spider or lunar lander bacteriophages. Now think about the characteristics that we just talked about, right? In terms of the characteristics of living things. Bacteriophages and viruses in general don't reproduce on their own. They don't have metabolism, right? So what you probably learned in, high school bio was viruses aren't alive because they don't have all of the characteristics that allow you to identify living things. No, this is not part of our immune system. This is a virus that infects bacteria. So this thing is a virus that infects this thing. Right? So I see some people saying yes, some people saying no. We've got a mix here and overall just fewer votes. So come on, folks. Don't be shy. There's no wrong answers here. So bacteriophage, yes or no? I see some people saying yes, some people saying no. Good, we got a mix. Okay, cool. Okay. So let's go to the next one. And the next one is where it starts to get interesting, I think. The next one is right here, is these little cells, all of these guys around here. Now, these are cells. The big one is a cell, and all these little ones are cells. These are all members of domain Archaea, so like they're kind of weird. And in particular, these little ones on the outside, and highlighting just one with the red arrow there, These are a group of organisms called the Nanoarchaeota. Nanoarchaeota. And they are among the smallest cells on Earth, and they are obligate ectoparasites of the larger cells that are their hosts. So the way these cells work is that they attach to the outside of their host and they create a channel between the two. They basically punch a hole in the cell wall and connect the two cytoplasms of the two cells. And they steal stuff from that host cell because they can't do a bunch of stuff on their own. So they're unable, for example, to do all of the metabolic processes that most cells can do. They actually are missing some tRNAs, so they have to steal tRNAs from their host, so they can't actually do gene expression without their host helping, which is very weird. So are those cells alive? Those Nanoarchaeota, are those obligate ectoparasites alive? They're among the smallest cells. They don't have a complete metabolic pathway. They can't even do gene expression fully on their own. Everyone give me a yes or no for that one. And again, remember, there is no wrong answers, but I want everyone to keep track, right? Like yes, no, yes, yes, no, right? Across the 5, because at the end, we're going to put all those answers together in chat. So I want you to keep track of your own answers as we're going through this. And if you're watching this later, future audience, you keep track as well and see how well you match the people in chat at the end. And I really like how there's disagreement here. This is good. We've got I have no idea, which is great. I've got conditionally, right? So, right, we're kind of okay, leaning towards not alive, right? So there's disagreement. I like this. This is good. Okay. Next one. We're going to go back to viruses now. So we did cell, virus, cell. Now we're going to go back to virus. But instead of doing a teeny little bacteriophage, we are going to go to the other end of the spectrum. We are going to talk about mimivirus, one of the largest viruses on Earth. And the name mimivirus, M-I-M-I, is actually short for mimicking microbe, because these guys were discovered in the early 1990s. They were isolated from, I think it was like a water tower. And they tried to culture them in the lab, like on a petri dish, because they were so big, everyone thought they were bacteria. And they couldn't successfully culture them. So they sat in a freezer for 10 years until someone decided, hey, let's take an electron micrograph. And when you look at them under an electron microscope, they are actually hexagonal in cross-section, as you can see, rather than circular. So right away, everyone went, oh, that's a virus, not a cell. That's super weird. It's the biggest virus we've ever seen. Now, we have since broken that record. There are a number of viruses in this group of these giant viruses. So you've got the Mimi virus, the next one up was the Mama virus. There's a cafeteria virus, Marseille virus. There's a whole bunch of viruses in this category now. And they're the biggest group of viruses just in terms of things like their physical size. They're way bigger, for example, than these cells right here. And they are about, so this virus, if you include the fibers going across, it's like 400 to 600 nanometers, which makes it like a significant fraction of this cell. Now, if you were to take this bacteriophage and scale it to this cell, it would be like a pixel. If you took this virus and scaled it to this cell, it would be like a third of the cell, right? So it is a very large virus. In addition to its physical size, it has a genome that is larger than many prokaryotic cellular genomes. It has more genes and does more biochemistry than many of the smaller prokaryotic cells. So uncharacteristically for viruses, for example, this virus actually makes its own tRNAs. It makes its own transfer RNAs instead of stealing them from the host. And then the last thing I'll tell you about this virus is, thank you, Icarus knows exactly where this is going, right? Perfect. It's like we planned it that way. These viruses infect amoeba, so they infect eukaryotes. And what they do is they basically break down the endomembrane system in the cell. and they build it up into their own structure, which we call the mimivirus factory, which then creates more mimiviruses and kind of sends them out into the environment to propagate, right? Oh, and I will also mention that the genomes of these viruses are super weird. They have genes that are characteristic of all three domains of life: eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. And there is a hypothesis, which I actually think is correct, that this one particular group of viruses represents a fourth domain of life, and that they are actually descended from cellular organisms. So whether you consider them alive based on their characteristics or not, I think it's most likely they're descended from cells, right? So that's a virus right there, but it's a very big, weird one. So what do we think of that? And while we're thinking about this, and everyone is deciding whether they want to say yes or no for number 4, and I want everyone to say yes or no in chat. If you're here, all 63 of you say yes or no, right? I also want to highlight a comment here from Nestlig saying that this commits a category error. I hold that thought, sir. Hold that thought, my friend, because we'll get there. Just hold that thought. Let me just tell you, I'm doing this in a very purposeful way, but hold that thought. All right, so we've got mostly alive for our Mimi virus. A lot of people are saying alive. Yeah, we got a lot of people saying alive. Isn't that what most viruses do on a smaller scale? So in terms of like the internal, most viruses kind of take over, but they don't generally build their own structures, whereas this virus kind of remakes the inside of the cell in a very particular way. Yeah, so we're saying yes. We're saying alive-ish. I love it. It's hard. Yeah, it is hard, isn't it? This is why this is a fun game. I like yes, but weird. That's a good answer. Yes, but weird for Mimi virus. Okay. We've got a nah. Okay, so no. Another no. All right, so we've got disagreement. Now, again, I want to remind everybody, make sure you're keeping track of your answers. So we've got 4 so far, yes, no, whatever your answers are. Keep track of that because we're going to do one more, and then we're going to put all 5 of them out. And we'll see the level of disagreement among everybody here. All right, last one. This one is a really cool parasitic organism. So here's what this one does. So this big cell right here, that's a eukaryote. This structure right here is not the nucleus. This structure right there is the structure that is making spores. So the parasite gets into this cell. It's an endoparasitic organism, and here it is. It grows inside the cell, and it uses that host for its energy, right? It's a parasite, right? And then it makes and releases spores. And you can see a bunch of those spores, like these dark figures around here. Those are all the spores, right? And so those are going to get released out into the environment, and that's how they propagate to other cells. Okay, so it can't reproduce on its own. It requires the energy and stuff in the host cell. But you can see it makes it's its own thing inside the host cell, and then it propagates to other cells. So where do we put that last one? What do we think? Is that last one alive or not alive? We got alive. We got some people saying alive. Okay, we're saying alive here. Okay. Okay, so this one people are like, yeah, that one's alive. That one seems pretty straightforward. It's like an endoparasite, like it looks like a cell, right? It's okay. Okay. So everyone now, give me your I like Chip. Thanks, Chip. I'll be contrary and say not alive. Okay. Yeah, this is more alive-ish, right? We're getting all right. So here's what I want everyone to do. If you've been playing along this whole time, just put in the chat. Just give me like why, and why, why and why, right? Give me your 5, right? And the most people, when I do this in class, it's going to be everyone's going to generally agree on the first 2 and say yes and then no because they've learned that viruses are not alive. And then it gets more complicated after that, right? So I'm just gonna see what everyone's doing here. Let's see. So we've got a bunch of people just saying yes. We've got yes, no, then all yeses, yes, no, no, yes, 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 yes. Y, Y, X, Y. Okay. There's definitely a Rush joke coming at some point here. Yes, no, yes, yes, no. Yes, no, no-ish, yes-ish, yes. I love it. This might be my favorite one so far. Overwhelmingly, the most common answer so far is all, nope, not that one, this one, all yeses, which is surprising to me, but I think you all watching this live are probably more savvy just in terms of biology than kind of your average audience. So I think that's why a lot of you are making that determination. But I do love answers like this, and this, and this. Yes, no, yes, no, yes. Okay. So we've got a wide range of answers here. And here's the thing that, here's where it gets fun. Those last two examples right here, this one and this one, those are the same. I just described them differently, but those are the same thing. So how does everybody feel about that? I'm going to give everybody a minute to absorb that. Yeah, if you were to zoom in on this picture right here, if you were to look at like one of those things that I called spores, it would be this. It blows up to that. And the reason I did it that way is because so much of this question of is it alive or is it not alive is based on how we describe the things. And this structure right here, that this virus forms when it takes over its host amoeba. I love how angry you all are right now. I love it. I love the reactions I get in class. It's you all are doing exactly the right reaction. This is great. Thank you, chat, for playing along in my bit of deception here. So this structure is called the Mimivirus factory, and it is a lipid enclosed structure that has nucleic acids that replicate, and it does metabolism, and it does gene expression. And like this thing, this Mimivirus factory sure looks like a prokaryotic cell, right? It really looks like a prokaryotic cell. And then you could treat these things that it secretes as spores, right? Or you could look at the spores and say that's a virus, right? In which case that changes the paradigm in terms of how you're thinking about it. It's just which stage in its life cycle, or let's not assume it's alive, right? Let's just say which stage in its replication cycle do you characterize as the main stage or the defining stage? Do you define the intra-host stage, where it's this, where it sure looks like kind of a prokaryotic cell that's taken over a eukaryotic cell? Or do you define it based on the transmission stage, where it's a protein coat surrounding a lipid bubble containing nucleic acids, right? Do you define it based on one or the other? If you define it based on the transmission stage, you're going to call it a virus. If you define it based on the intracellular stage, you might call it an intracellular prokaryotic parasite, right? Which one of those is correct? I don't know, right? It's kind of arbitrary whether you define it one way or the other, especially given their genome. It seems to be that they're descended from cells. So, it could go either way with that one. So let's come back to this question. Let's kind of step back and say, are any viruses alive, right? Because we've now documented viruses that are bigger than many prokaryotic cells and that do more stuff, like biochemically, than some prokaryotic cells, right? Are those viruses alive? Or do we have to go the other way and say, wait, are all cells really alive? What if those cells are actually not alive because they don't do all of those things? One way we can try to answer this question is just how much biology do they do? And I'm going to kind of assign a range of biology on a highly unscientific axis. And in case you're wondering, yes, I do use this in class, where how much biology do they do, spanning from a whole lot to not very much, right? Now, if we put cells on there, we get a whole lot, but there are some cells that are like obligate parasites that actually don't do a lot of their own biochemistry, and they are reliant on their hosts. Now, viruses, right? There's a big range there where the biggest viruses, right, those Mimi viruses, they're in a group called the NCLDVs, the nucleocytoplasmic large DNA viruses. Those viruses right there do more stuff for themselves than the smallest parasitic cells. So if you're going to say all cellular life is alive, it would be really arbitrary to exclude the largest viruses from that category, right? That doesn't seem to make any sense. But the smallest viruses over here have genomes that are less than 10,000 base pairs, and sometimes, because they could be single-stranded, either DNA or RNA, they could be just bases rather than base pairs, and they only have two main genes. They have the gene for the coat protein, and they have a gene called the replicase, not even the replicase, the replication-associated protein, and it's the gene that when it's expressed in a host cell, it basically says, copy me, and then the host does everything else for that virus. But where are we to draw the line on that spectrum? If we say these viruses are alive over here, and these viruses are not, where do we draw the line with the viruses? It seems really arbitrary to me, especially since at the end of the day, all viral life cycles are basically doing the same thing, right? But are these the only two categories of things in biology? Can we name some other things? I know some of you have already named other things earlier in this video. In the chat, people were already naming other things that complicate it even further. What are some other entities we can name that operate kind of similar to viruses, but kind of different and overlap in terms of the amount of biochemistry they do? Yeah, prions are one. They're weird because they're just polypeptides, right? Those are, oh, not vampires. There we go. Prions, right? Those are the misfolded proteins. I'm not going to worry about prions because those are super weird, but let's stick with nucleic acid stuff. Yeah, here we go. We got plasmids, right? Plasmids are a good one. Yeah, plasmids are little circular bits of DNA that exist in mostly prokaryotic cells. The way they replicate is very similar to viruses. The difference is they don't have a capsid that allows them to transmit extracellularly. Instead, they'll transmit from cell to cell using a process called conjugation. And let me describe conjugation for anyone who's not familiar with it. The plasmid codes for a structure made of protein, and then when the host cell expresses those genes, it makes a protein structure that allows the plasmid to transmit from the one host cell to the other. It makes a copy and it sends the copy to the other cell. Uses a protein structure to transmit its genome from one cell to the other. Sounds like a virus, right? But that protein structure, instead of being a capsid, it's a tube that connects the two cells together. So if the viruses are alive, if we say, all right, fine, because of those big viruses, there's no way to exclude the viruses, what about plasmids? Why would we exclude plasmids then? They do all the same stuff as basically bacteriophages. Why not? Yeah, I like this. Virus is a parasitic capsid. I don't know if you meant to say capsid or plasmid, but I would argue if you meant to say plasmid, I would argue that plasmids are already parasitic because they do some really crafty stuff, like make a toxin and the antidote to the toxin. And if the prokaryotic host tries to kick out the plasmid, the antidote has a shorter half-life, so then it kills from the toxin, so it's kind of a hostage situation. Yeah. And there's one more category that we haven't mentioned, but I'm sure somebody here knows what makes up like 45% of the human genome. Oh, I'm glad someone mentioned viroids. That's not on this table, but I was going to mention viroids at the end. Yep, you've got viroids, satellite viruses, virophages. That Mimi virus I mentioned has its own viruses. They're called virophages, where it infects the Mimi virus factory rather than the host amoeba. It needs a co-infection with the big virus to work. Okay, we got it on here. Yes. Let me put this down, and here we go. Transposons. Oop, there we go. Transposons. The chat's moving so fast I can't click correctly. Right? Little bits of nucleic acid that are essentially genomic parasites. Right? So you have these either cut and paste or copy and paste little bits that stick themselves into your DNA, and then they either make a copy and put themselves somewhere else, or they cut themselves out and put themselves somewhere else. And these just end up replicating all in your DNA. Over 40% of the human genome is retrotransposons, right? Yeah, we could just call these transposable elements, right? If you want to lump the retrotransposons and the DNA transposons together. What about those? Are they alive? They certainly evolve, right? They convey, genetic information. They have inheritance. They have offspring. They evolve. They don't have metabolism. They don't replicate on their own. They require a host, but they check a lot of the other boxes, and it's kind of weird, right? Where do we draw the line? And you can keep going from this. Like we said, you could talk about viroids. You could talk about satellite viruses, virophages, prions. Where do you draw the line with all of this stuff? So the point that I want to convey here, and that I try to convey to my students, is the complexity of biology. Is there a single definition for alive? Right? Is there a single set of criteria where we could objectively say, here's all the living stuff, here's all the non-living stuff, right? Are there two categories, living and non-living? And we could easily or objectively or according to some concrete criteria sort everything into those two categories, living and non-living. Is that something we can do? Doesn't seem like it, right? It really doesn't seem like it. It seems like instead what we have is a continuum of biochemical and biological activity. And there's nowhere where we can draw a non-arbitrary line between living and non-living. Instead, what we can, I think what we should do is recognize that there's this gradient, right, where we can point to different entities and understand that they interact with other biological systems and contribute to the history and the health and the fitness, right, in the evolutionary sense, of those other systems, and are also dependent upon those systems for their own fitness, their own propagation, right? Without being able to say, like, here's the line where these things are all not alive and these things are alive, right? So that's where we're going to end this one, folks, with the idea that the question of what is living, contrary to what you may have learned in like 9th grade biology, is actually a really, really complicated question, right? And one of my favorite things that I like to try to convey to my students is the messiness and the complexity of biology and the uncertainty of biology. And as I like to remind my students, physics has laws, chemistry has rules, and biology has exceptions. And the definition of life is a really fun place to look into that because you can see where that messiness is. So that's where we're going to end this one, folks. Please remember before you go to do me a solid and hit the like button, or if you really hate thinking about biology, feel free to hit the dislike button. Either one will do fine. Leave a comment. It would be good actually. Leave a comment telling me your, yes, yes, no, yes, yes. I want to see what your answers are down below. So leave a comment with your answers so that future viewers can kind of see how they compare to the other people as they played along with the Is It Alive game. Feel free to, share this video and subscribe. And if you're not subscribed, welcome, and do all that fun stuff. That's where we're going to end it for tonight, everybody. I'll be back on Wednesday. I have another virus-related thing I think I'm going to do on Wednesday if I can get my stuff together on time. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody. And for everyone that participated in chat, thank you. This wouldn't have worked without all of your participation. Have a great night, everybody. I will see you next time. And as always, don't get fooled.